the app in Huntsville, in Mobile, all throughout the great state of Alabama. It's always a lot of fun to visit with you, and we're very happy to have our next guest, good friend of mine, Richard Cross, host of Sports Talk Mississippi. You can follow him at Richard Cross STM. You can listen to him over there. You can find him on ESPN. You can find him on SEC Network. You can find him all over the place. And Richard, it's always great to get your perspective, my friend. How are you this morning?
Greg, good to be with you. It's a little bit of a mess in Oxford right now after the rough weather that came through Saturday night and Sunday and Monday. There are a lot of people that are still without power, and I was thinking about that when you called yesterday, and in a lot of ways, it looks like a winter tornado. I was thinking about how devastating that storm was in Birmingham and Tuscaloosa several years ago, and in a lot of ways, Oxford kind of looks like that. But we're hanging in there, and there are people that are still thinking about football, even while trying to get their power back on, and tree limbs off of lines and out of their yard, and hoping for the best.
Yeah, just awful. I mean, I saw some of the pictures. It's like, goodness gracious. I feel like Oxford looking around, and uh, that was like one of the worst hit areas, I feel like, of the entire country. And obviously, the
Yeah.
Northeast got 20 plus inches of snow, but the damage that we've seen out of Oxford and in parts of Mississippi, really sad. And hopefully, our show, your show, all these other shows can serve as an escape from the uncomfortable realities that are currently going on for a lot of folks. So hate that, but certainly our thoughts and prayers have been with the wonderful people of Mississippi, and hoping things get
Thank you.
rebuilt back very quickly. Not a big deal when it comes to the grand scheme of life, but it's been a big deal in the college football world. This whole Pete Golding versus Dabo Sweeney drama feels a little manufactured. I do think the time of year factors in here, and we've heard the Clemson perspective. We had Larry Williams on in the first hour, but help me understand the Ole Miss perspective based on what we've heard from Clemson and what little we've heard from Ole Miss.
Well, I mean, I think at the most basic level, Ole Miss is glad that Luke Farrelly is in Oxford, and they think he is a phenomenal player. And linebacker was a position of need after some of what Ole Miss had to deal with in the transfer portal, especially with TJ Dottery leaving. There was a linebacker that they had early in the transfer portal process from Southern Miss that committed, and everything looked good there. And then he decided to go elsewhere. He's now at Florida State, and so that was a really significant position of need. I mean, I don't know all the ins and outs of exactly what happened. I do know that I'm sure you and I and lots of other people have either said or heard people talking about tampering being a significant issue in college football, and yet there's nothing you can do about it. And it's interesting to me that, Clemson, to say they were late to the game on the transfer portal would be a massive understatement. They were a non-entity in the transfer portal by Dabo's own admission, and now they've kind of finally dipped their toes in the water, and they didn't realize how cold the water was and how deep the water was, and the fact that there were sharks circling in the water, and all of those things. Um, it's going to be fascinating to me to see what how the NCAA looks at this. I mean, Dabo said in that press conference last week that they had turned over all the information, but is that a can of worms that the NCAA and its limited ability for enforcement and for punishment, is that what they want to tackle? Or is this something that they see as low-hanging fruit and it's an opportunity for them to make an example?
That's what I'm curious about. Is I feel like off everyone complains of tampering, but seldom do we have a line item the way that Dabo Sweeney laid it out with screenshots and timestamps and things like that. So it feels like this is much more detailed. Um, and it does feel like if the NCAA, it feels like a layup if they wanted to pursue something, but do they really want to? I guess is my big question. And based on your conversation with the folks around Oxford, were they surprised at the attack that Clemson went on? Were they taken aback? Do they feel like they feel kind of caught off guard with how this went down? I mean, what was their immediate reaction?
Well, I guess I'd start by going back to something that Dabo said in that press conference. He said, other coaches had reached out to him and they all agreed that it was awful. And he made the statement that, hey, I appreciate you reaching out, but you got to call this out. Well, there's a reason that nobody calls it out, and it's because everybody's doing it. Um, you know, is Alabama tampering with other players that are not in the portal? Of course they are. But are Alabama players being tampered with by teams with players that are not in the portal? Absolutely. I don't know that there is another team in the country that dealt with tampering more than Ole Miss did this year when it comes to LSU and Lane Kiffin making the move and having coaches who were doing both, right, that were on staff still at Ole Miss while they were now employed by LSU. And so it's one of those things where I took a class in college a long time ago. It was called International Conflict in the Nuclear Age. It was a political science class, and it was about war theory and game theory. And one of the I'm not trying to bore you with this, but mutually assured destruction was part of the whole international conflict thing. And it's the idea of I have a nuclear weapon and you don't, you're in trouble. But if we both have nuclear weapons, it neutralizes what we can do because our mutually assured destruction could be imminent. So I know that doesn't answer exactly what you were saying. Probably a little caught off guard and maybe a little taken aback that this would become as public as it has. And again, I think the reason for that is even though everybody hates it, coaches, administrators, everybody's doing it. And so to see a program of the stature of Clemson come out and you're like, well, maybe that's the one program with the way Dabo has run things and the way he has viewed the transfer portal where you probably should be really, really careful if you're going back after one of their players that's not in the portal.
Yeah, looking at all of it, it's really really fast. I agree with you. Like I think this is actually a way to curb the behavior though, where if everyone's tampering, no one's denying that. To what extent, I don't know. I'm sure some places tamper more than others. Like you said, I'm sure
Sure.
Ole Miss was on the receiving end of tampering this year. I think that's probably a safe assumption of this point, and it's a dog eat dog world. But do you think that coaches being proactive about calling out specific examples and citing specific examples, do you think that will help curb the behavior, or do you think it's just another day in the life of being a college head coach?
No, I don't think it's going to change anything. I mean, just bluntly, because ultimately, what have coaches got to do? They've got to build rosters that have a chance to compete at the highest level to try and get into the playoff and win a championship. And we've got about, I don't know, 100 years worth of example of coaches being willing to either color in the gray area or get way off the reservation if necessary to secure the players that they need to secure. And maybe that's not a warm and fuzzy answer, but with the system that is in place right now, and it's the combination of people talked about the calendar and the pressure to win and the money being so big and the players having all the power and unscrupulous agents that are involved. And goodness knows, I mean, agents get painted in such a bad light. There are good agents out there. There are agents out there that are doing it the right way, but there are a lot that aren't. And so, no, I don't think it's going to go away at all. And I don't really even think that how this particular situation with Pirelli plays out is going to have, I mean, maybe it's a speed bump, Greg, but am I crazy? I mean, I don't see anything changing, not within the system we've got right now.
No, it certainly doesn't feel that way. Not if the NCAA, in this particular case, like this is a case in which there's timestamps and documentation of alleged tampering. Like if nothing comes of this, then the rules, it's over. Like I mean, and I don't even know what do you penalize them with? A fine? Like I don't even fine them. Who cares? Like I mean, it's like
and
what,
in the rule book that does exist now, in whatever form it exists, I think that tampering is a level 2 violation. So you're not even talking about one of those most serious level one violations that we used to hear about. And so I don't know, is there some sort of probation? Is it, you're allowed fewer spring recruiting visits? I don't know. I don't know what the penalty matrix says. I've gotten to the point where when it comes to the NCAA, I just roll my eyes. And at the same time, because of the history and some of the things that Ole Miss fans have had to go through in the past, I go, surely not. In this age where, everybody's going 100 miles an hour in a 50-mile-an-hour zone, surely Ole Miss is not going to be the one that gets caught in all of this, and there's a significant problem.
I can't imagine. Frankly, I don't think much is going to come of it. Do you lose a couple days on the road recruiting? Perhaps. Maybe there's a slight probationary
Is anybody
period.
going the road recruiting anymore, though?
No, not with Zooms. We're good. I mean, it's like, I don't know. I don't know. If you could send contracts via screenshots and picture messages, then what more do you need? I mean, it's pretty simple, I think. When evaluating, visiting with Richard Cross here, does a great job. Sports Talk Mississippi, also calling games on ESPN. With
hey,
this
Greg,
transition to Pete
something?
Golding, go ahead. What'd you say?
No. I complimentary. I hope you will understand that I've not gone back and rewatched the Fiesta Bowl in its entirety. I have gone back and rewatched the Sugar Bowl, and you guys were phenomenal on that game. It was,
I appreciate it.
and look, I understand that the result maybe causes that, but beyond the result, it was such an exciting game, and you and Sean did a fantastic job on that. It was really, really good.
Well, I appreciate it, buddy. It was one of the great games I've ever been fortunate enough to call. I mean, you're in this world. You're only as good as the game.
That's right.
I'd love to tell you that, we just crushed the Peach Bowl too, but the game got a little sideways. There's only so much you can do. You need it to come down to the wire, and fortunately for us, the Sugar Bowl did. Looking at Pete Golding and his transition, I think all of us, granted, they probably got to iron out a couple mechanics as it relates to clock management and timeouts and what if he's calling defense, who's in charge of the offense. And I do feel like their processes in the postseason weren't ideal from a clock management standpoint, stuff like that, but that's to be expected. They're drinking water through a fire hose. So how do you think he's done in his first month as the head coach, and how do you view him long-term as the guy?
I know you know Pete well, and I think you start with the fact that he's a really, really bright guy. And I don't just mean football. Now, from a football sense, he is like rocket scientist. I may have told you this story before. A couple of years ago, Chris Doring and I were doing the Ole Miss spring game. It was the first year that Pete was on staff after he came over from Alabama. And we were doing our coaches meetings the day before, and we had talked with Charlie Weiss Jr. and we had talked with Lane, and we had our chance to visit with Pete. And it was like he was speaking a foreign language. I mean, he kind of got up on the board, was showing us stuff, and he talks fast, and it was like he was speaking in Mandarin. And we walked out of there, and I was like, man, I thought I kind of knew football, and I've got no idea. So the next day, we're on the field before the game, and we see Pete, and we say hi, and walks away, and Doring looks at me. He goes, hey, I got to admit something to you. I said, all right, what's up? He goes, man, in that meeting yesterday, Pete was saying stuff that, like, I thought I knew what he was talking about, but I really wasn't sure. I was like, I feel so much better with you saying that. Because you're a guy that played in the SEC and played in the NFL and kind of understand these concepts. So he's a really football mind, and he doesn't seem to have changed kind of who he is. He's real with the players. He, in a time when Ole Miss, and I'm kind of using that as a broad term, really needed it, he made the focus about Ole Miss. He made the focus about the players during that playoff run. And frankly, that had not been the case since early October. Everything about Ole Miss had been about Lane Kiffin. And I think it's part of the reason, and I don't know if you felt this way or not, but going into that Sugar Bowl game with Georgia, it was like there were new stories to tell, despite the fact that it was the 13th or 14th game of the year, because Trinidad Chambliss' story had not really been told and documented. The season that Keelan Lacey had, the emergence of Will Eccles on the defensive line, and kind of Xavier Harris and what he meant to that group, and Prince Willie Allen and the season that he had, and what Centurion Perkins meant to this defense. Those stories really had not been given their due throughout the course of the season because all of the oxygen had been kind of consumed by the drama surrounding Lane Kiffin and what he was going to do and whether or not he was going to come back. And Pete allowed a lot of those stories because he just didn't make it about himself to kind of come to the forefront. What's it going to look like going forward? I mean, I think there's a wait and see mode. There's no denying that Lane Kiffin had immense success in Oxford, success at a level where it was sustained that had not been seen since the late 50s and the early 60s. And so being able to replicate that is the challenge now, right? I mean, it's not exactly, it's not even close to Kalen DeBoer following Nick Saban, but this is still kind of the guy following the guy in terms of I think he's equipped for it. I think he's excited about the opportunity and the job that they've done in the portal and kind of shoring up the recruiting class seems to have Ole Miss in a talent spot where they're going to have a chance to be pretty good again next year, especially if ultimately Trinidad Chambliss is deemed to be eligible for a sixth year.
Yeah, do we have any updates on that? Have you heard anything? I mean, it sounds like he's going to be, and then it sounds like he's not going to be. It's kind of all over the place. Have you heard anything that would give you confidence that he's going to be back for 26?
Just, I mean, there seems to be optimism in and around the Ole Miss program, and I think the biggest reason for that is where this lawsuit seeking an injunction was filed. I mean, it was filed in state court in Mississippi. I think there's a story floating around in Alabama about a judge that might be friendly, that might have been good for Alabama basketball. I think there are a lot of Ole Miss folks that are hoping that a Mississippi judge in a state chancery court will be friendly for Ole Miss. There was some thought that in the latest appeal, because Ole Miss is continuing to go through that process with the NCAA, that the governing body of college athletics might look at this and go, this is a waste of time. Give him the year of eligibility. It's a good story for college football. Let's move forward. I don't think that's happened yet. And so there's some thought that maybe the NCAA could change its mind on an appeal and avoid the egg on their face of losing in court yet again.
Yeah, it'll be wild. That's for sure. And I mean, I want him to play selfishly. I want to see him out there
me
for
too.
sure. But then again, with what we've seen with Charles Bediako and what we've seen with Diego Pavia, like I'm fully convinced that we're going to have 37-year-olds playing college football here very soon. But we'll see. Hopefully not, but we shall see. Richard, we really appreciate the time, man. Thanks for the perspective. And, of course, thoughts and prayers to all those affected by the storms out there in Mississippi.
Thank you, Greg. I appreciate it. Great visiting with you.
All right, always good to visit with Richard Cross. Good friend of the program. Always does a great job. You can find him on Sports Talk Mississippi. You can follow him at Richard Cross STM on Twitter. And you can see him on a lot of ESPN, SEC Network games, calling games throughout the spring, summer, fall, all over the place. He's always on the move. So we appreciate his time today. All right, when we come back, we'll kind of put a bow on the Ole Miss Clemson debate. We also need to continue on with your phone calls, 800-239-9569. You can call into the show at 205-834-9450. You can also text into the show at 205-834-9450. We want to get your reaction here in the final 40 minutes of the show. We've only taken a couple calls. Now we have nothing between now and the end of the show, so we want to make sure we get to you. We also have the Super Bowl. We need to do a little bit on that at some point in the next 40 minutes as well. Keep it locked in right here on Jocks 94.5. Welcome back, McElroy Cubelic in the morning. Moving right along here as we are approaching the final 30 minutes of the show. Some news out of Tuscaloosa. Alabama has hired or is expected to hire their offensive line coach. For those that were unaware or haven't been keeping up with it, Chris Cubelic was let go at the end of the year, and they have decided to go and hire a former NFL and college assistant coach, Adrian Clem, to coach the offensive line. He served this past season as a defensive assistant at USC, but has served as the offensive line coach for the New England Patriots, for the Oregon Ducks, the Pittsburgh Steelers, spent 5 years at UCLA, spent 3 years at SMU. He's been around for a while. He actually was a second-round pick of the New England Patriots back in 2000 and appeared in 42 NFL games throughout his career. He's 48 years old. He's a native of Los Angeles, California. And if you want me to be completely honest, I don't know a lot about him as an offensive line coach. I think that Cole, with his offensive line, buddies, then their little offensive line group chat is going to be really well equipped to help us understand what it is that Clem will bring to the Crimson Tide. But he does have a connection to the general manager, Courtney Morgan, who also is a Los Angeles native. He played offensive line. And then back in the day when Clem was actually coaching at UCLA, he convinced Coach Jim Mora to hire Courtney Morgan, the general manager, as the Bruins director of player development. So there is a connection there. Clem also had a son that played at Washington for Kalen DeBoer. So it'll be curious to see where things go with this, because if you look at Chris Cubelic, he was under contract for a long time. He got fired, wasn't going to work out. They lost the offensive line assistant to Oregon State. He went with Jamarcus Shepard. That was Kirk Barron. And of the 16 current offensive linemen on the staff, including the 5 members of the most recent signing class and the 6 players that have since joined in the transfer portal, 14 of those 16 offensive linemen were recruited by Cubelic by himself. So we'll see where it goes. Of course, the offensive line, a huge point of contention amongst me and Cole, and I think amongst most Alabama fans. They just ran for less than 3.5 yards a carry. The running backs by themselves averaged 4 yards a carry, which was 127th in college football. But there is reason to believe that this group in 2026 can take a significant step forward, and now we know the guy that will be leading that charge. So looking forward to getting Cole's evaluation and assessment, because I don't know. I really don't know. Everyone that's like, oh, we'll just go throw a ton of money at the Indiana offensive line coach. Oh, just go throw a ton of money at this person or at that person or at this person. It doesn't necessarily always work that way. One, a lot of people are good with where they're at, and a lot of people are pleased with their current circumstances, and they say, oh, well, it's Alabama. Yeah, but it doesn't work that way all the time. You and I might think of it that way, but not everybody sees it that way. So I think it's good to have a guy with NFL experience. I think it's good to have a guy that has been at the college level, at the pro level, that has played, so he can accurately speak to playing the position. That's 48, so he's relatively young when it comes to getting the most out of those guys. So it'll be fascinating to see what he brings with it. But like I said, can't speak a whole lot on what he is philosophically or how he plans to approach the position group. But that group hopefully will be better. Hopefully. That's the goal. Can't be much worse. And to think that there was a, quote, consensus All-American on that offensive line last year. How he was a consensus All-American, I don't know. But that's beside the point. Of course, star power and star rankings and all these other things factor into that as well. But that group should be improved across the board. Another piece of information today, this morning, doesn't really matter as much to our neck of the woods, but it's been big from a college football standpoint, a big hot topic of debate. Darian Mensah, the quarterback for the Duke Blue Devils, well, he had entered the transfer portal after signing his deal with Duke, and a lot of people believe that tampering was involved with this, and it's a lot of people believe that Mensah is, for all intents and purposes, headed to Miami. It's done. Well, according to Pete Thamel this morning and others, Darian Mensah and Duke have agreed to a settlement of their dispute that will clear the way for the quarterback to transfer to another school. That's what his agency announced. So, like I said, a lot of people expecting him to go to Miami, and Duke, not a school you want to mess with, especially when it comes to lawyering up, because Duke officials sued Darian Mensah and the Durham County Superior Court. That was on January 20th in an attempt to prevent him from transferring and to enforce the multi-year NIL contract that he signed with the school. Well, on the 21st, he went into the transfer portal, and it's, from what I'm told, been really, really difficult. And Duke was always about, quote, upholding the contract. But can anything be upheld anymore? I really don't know. I have no idea how it's all going to work out. But Mensah, prior to being at Duke last year, and remember, he did lead Duke to an ACC championship game. They finished the season after a bowl win at 9-5. So a pretty dang good year by Duke standards. They won the ACC for the first time in a long time. But it's looking like he's going to be the heir apparent to Carson Beck, who just took the Hurricanes to their first national championship game since 2002. Amazingly, lost in this whole conversation has been Duke's leading receiver, Cooper Barkate, also decided to enter the transfer portal. That was prior to the transfer portal window closing, and Barkate was second in the ACC in receiving yards, had over 1,100 yards. It's sounding like he's going to be transferring to Miami as well. So not only is Miami staying in conference and going and taking all these guys, they're taking the quarterback and the top receiver off of the conference champion from a year ago, and several believe that the reason why Miami got in the playoff is because Duke ended up winning the conference championship. Now, that's conspiratorial, but people think, well, they're not going to have a postseason in which the ACC is not represented. So Duke winning, Duke wasn't going to make it at 8-5 at the end of the regular season, but that gave the committee reason to bump Miami ahead of Notre Dame so that the ACC would have a team. Had Virginia won the ACC championship game, Virginia would have gone in, and then ultimately Notre Dame would have gone in as well. So I know it's very conspiratorial. I know it's all in the weeds and confusing, but there's a lot of people that connect the dots. So in many ways, Miami not only got into the playoff last year because of Duke, but now they're taking their two best players on the offensive side. So crazy times in the sport that we love so much, but when toe meets leather in the fall, it's still pretty dang good. All right, when we come back, we're going to continue on with our conversation about the college football playoff. Why we stayed at 16, is it the right, or why we stayed at 12, is it the right decision, and what it means for college football in the future. We'll explain next on Mac and Q. Welcome back to McElroy and Cubelic in the morning on Jock 94.5. Just 25 minutes away from handing it over to three-man front. They'll continue the conversation. I'm sure Ole Miss and Clemson will be part of that. I'm sure they'll talk a little bit about the transfer portal, what's coming, what's going. I'm sure they'll hit a little hoop. Lots of action tonight. Bama going to be up tonight against Mizzou. At game tips, I believe it's 7 o'clock local time, trying to get back on track after a disappointing performance on Saturday. Really disappointing performance, frankly, but hopefully get back on track. Missouri is 14-6 overall, 4-3 in the SEC. Bama's about a 10-point favorite right now. Bama just 3-3 in the SEC after a couple difficult games here against Texas and then, of course, against Tennessee. They did have back-to-back road wins that were encouraging. Great comeback against Oklahoma. But trying to get back on track a little bit tonight before they have to go to Florida this weekend. That'll be a very difficult game. Florida, the 19th ranked team in the country, but a team that has been outstanding, just 5-2 in the league so far. So kind of a must-win tonight because it gets tough. You got at Florida this weekend. You got A&M after that. A&M sits atop the SEC standings right now. And then on the 7th, the Iron Bowl of basketball. Of course, I'm not allowed to say that while Cole's here, so might as well do it now. Iron Bowl of basketball at Auburn on the 7th. So a lot to look forward to when it comes to hoop here over the next couple of days. And look, you might be feeling a little under the weather. I'm a little under the weather. Damian, what do we need to do when it comes to train?
Yeah, man, flu season is here. Make your home healthier with Train's Clean Effects Home Air Cleaner. It removes up to 99.9% of airborne particles, including those that cause virus, and is 100 times more effective than standard air filters and 8 times more effective than the HEPA room filters. Find a dealer near you at train.com.
Look, this 12-team playoff versus 16-team playoff versus 24-team playoff, man, it's unbelievable. Like, I'm really, really glad, I am, that the SEC decided to dig in. I am. I'm really, really glad that happened. And that's not coming from like an SEC guy. That's coming from a college football guy. Like, yes, I am an SEC supporter. No doubt about it. My team's in the SEC. I cover the SEC on a week-to-week basis. If I were working for CBS or Fox or NBC and I had exclusive access to the Big Ten and no SEC, I would have the same perspective. It doesn't change. To me, going to 24, the toothpaste cannot be put back in the tube, Damian. Like, once you go to 24, it's a wrap. Like, they're not going to go to 24, start cashing checks and say to themselves, you know what, guys? Let's go back to 16. This was too much. Like, I don't see that happening. I just don't see it. I really, really, really want us to dig in. I do not want to see the college football playoff expand past 16. 16 solves all of our problems. It still puts a high premium on playing a quality schedule. It still puts a high premium on having a good win-loss record. It still puts a high premium on giving those top 4 seeds home playoff games. So the long layoff, as we know, it's been documented. The teams that are coming off the bye in the 12-team format are 1-7. The one winner was Indiana. Everyone else has lost that we're coming off a bye. So I do think that's a factor, and having a 28-day layoff can work against you, especially if you're playing good football at the end of the year. So I really want those teams to be rewarded with a first-round home playoff game. It's one of the great experiences that you have. Hosting a team, and look, those teams 2, 3, and 4, are they at a disadvantage because they're not going to be playing the G5 champ? Yeah, they are. So how do you alleviate that concern? Well, just go undefeated and win the Big Ten or the SEC. Easier said than done, but you want to be the number 1 overall seed? Great. You get a bye, essentially, in the first round by having a scrimmage against a team that has no chance. That's great. We can all get on board with that. But, Damian, had they gone to 24, what do you think the format would have done to the regular season?
It would have watered it down because you would know midway through October if you're in good standing or not, if you're pretty much undefeated getting into the month of October. As long as you don't blow it on the way out, like you'll be fine. to me, year to year, you can't tell me there are 24 teams that deserve a chance to play for a national championship. And I think you get that separation in the regular season. Like, I don't, again, no disrespect to the teams that are in the top 25, but when you really buckle it down of who is the best team in college football, I don't think you can have a discussion at 22, 23 that you're at the top, because that means you didn't handle your business to be in the top 10 or top 12, to say the least.
Answer me this. Like, I understand why the Big Ten wants 24. I get it. It makes perfect sense to me. But in the SEC, let's start with the SEC. Tell me a team in the SEC right now that doesn't think they can be competitive, that doesn't think they can compete at the top of the game.
Right now, I'd say Kentucky.
Well, just historically.
Historically? Oh, yeah, like the Kentuckys, the Mississippi States. I know they did have the first number one college football playoff ranking, but for the most part, it's the Kentuckys, the Vanderbilts of the world, Arkansas at times, but it's pretty consistent.
Well, I think you look at it like, all right, Kentucky traditionally has been pretty content with, hey, let's try to get to 7, 8. If we have a great year, we'll win 9, maybe 10. Who knows? It's crazy. But I think they're one of the few examples of a team that historically has not viewed themselves as a legitimate big or SEC championship contender. I think Vanderbilt would be comparable. Now, that's changed a little bit this year and last year. Maybe they view themselves in a slightly different light, but traditionally they probably wouldn't view themselves as hey, we can go toe-to-toe with Georgia every year. They're not viewing themselves that way. I think Mississippi State is also a team that probably doesn't view themselves as a team that should be in the top 2 or 3 in the SEC every year. Doesn't mean they can't be. It's just that's not what the expectation level is. But that's 3. 3 teams in the SEC. South Carolina fans believe they can be up there? Obviously, right? Missouri has been to the SEC title game. Ole Miss has never been to the SEC championship game, but guess what? They've been close an awful lot, and they punched their ticket to the playoff last year and made a run to the semifinal. So their expectations have changed drastically. Arkansas has been to the SEC championship game. It's been a little bit, but they've had some good years. A lot of good years, frankly, in the last 20. Now, since A&M's been in the league, not so many. Since Texas and Oklahoma have been in the league, none. So that's going to be challenging now with the landscape changing the way it's changed for them. But I look at them, and it's a very small pool in the SEC that doesn't necessarily have championship level expectations. Let's go to the Big Ten. How many teams, Damian, in the Big Ten, do you think go into the season thinking, yep, we can win it this year?
Ohio State and Michigan.
And?
I mean, USC?
Oregon.
And Oregon, yeah, I forgot. You know, I'm so used to the Pac-12 version of them. But, yeah, they're in the Big Ten.
Look at you. All right. But do you think Purdue expects to be there?
Absolutely not.
You think Maryland expects to be there?
No, not at all.
What about Rutgers?
Nope.
What about UCLA?
Absolutely not. They're a basketball school.
What about Northwestern?
Maybe in the academic championship, but no.
What about Minnesota?
Lord, no.
All right. So I just gave you 6 teams out of 18 that have no expectation of being in the championship mix, right? I think a lot of teams in the Big Ten know that if they have a good year, a la Illinois, and they finish the season, say, 9-4, 8-4, a la Washington, finish the season 8-4, a la, Iowa, who perennially, almost every year, is like 8-4, 9-3. Wisconsin, when they were rolling, granted, different era because they played in the Big Ten West, and the Big Ten West was at one point probably the most gettable of all the divisions in the sport. Wisconsin would have some years. Like, they have a bunch of teams that view an 8-4 season as an excellent year. 9-3 season is an excellent year, historically speaking. Historically speaking. And that's not a negative. It's just in a 24-team field, those 8-4, 9-3s are going to be right on the cut line. They're going to be right in the mix. So half their league is going to view playoff status as a real possibility at 24. But they're probably not viewing it as a real possibility in the 12-team format. What about in the 16-team format? Well, 8-4 is not getting you there. No way. Unless, for whatever reason, there's massive chaos and craziness all throughout the league. It's possible, I suppose, but it certainly feels unlikely. Very unlikely. In the 4-team playoff, no shot, right? Yeah, there was a year or two in which Iowa was undefeated, and had they won the Big Ten championship, they would have made the postseason. There was a year or two in which, Minnesota was in the top 10 to 12 going into the final 2 or 3 weeks of the regular season. But if you looked at their strength of schedule, it was oftentimes very, very disappointing. Now, Indiana kind of disputes this whole narrative. They went from the outhouse to the penthouse pretty dang quickly. But that's the anomaly. It's one of the great coaching jobs we've ever seen. It's one of the great turnarounds we've ever seen. Is it sustainable? I certainly hope so. I certainly think so. But I don't know so. I think it is. Pretty sure it is. But certainly don't know that at this juncture. So it can be done. It can absolutely be done. It's just harder. So I can understand why they want more spots, because they're going to have if you look at the Big Ten, yeah, they had 3 teams in the top 5 this year. That was excellent between Ohio State, Indiana, and Oregon. But if you go down historically, they're going to have a ton of teams between 21 and 25. They have for a long time. They have. I've done this playoff show now for several years. I feel like every year the Big Ten is really well represented between, say, 18 and 25. But it's not often that they have teams 1, 2, 5, 7, 8, 10. The SEC, meanwhile, has a ton of teams at the top, but not really that many teams at the bottom very often, because usually teams separate. But the SEC really believes every single one of those teams that we reference now, if we were to go to a 16-team league, there's not a team in the SEC that would say, we can't get there. Every single one thinks they can because of how they resource the program. Let's look at the rankings from last year. If the 16-team playoff format was in place, the SEC would have 7 of the 16 teams. 7. They had 7 teams ranked in the top 15. Granted, it's just last year, but I bet if we looked historically, it'd be significant. Guess how many teams would be in from the Big Ten in a 16-team format?
I'd say 5.
3.
3.
Indiana, Ohio State, and Oregon. USC was 20th, Michigan was 21st, Iowa was 17th. So no wonder they want to go to a 24-team format, because Washington would have probably been in the mix in that scenario. Illinois would have been in the mix in that scenario. Minnesota might have been in the mix in that scenario. Granted, the SEC, yeah. Missouri would have been in the mix, potentially. Maybe Tennessee would have been in the mix, potentially. But probably not. Not ahead of those teams. I just listed 3 teams that finished the season 9-4. Of course, Illinois beat Tennessee. So had Tennessee won, they would have been 9-4. And Illinois would have been 8-5. So I can see, right now, why they're pushing for more spots. It makes perfect sense. But is it in the best interest of the Big Ten, or is it in the best interest of college football? That's what you have to ask yourself. And I cannot get on board with the team that goes 8-4 making the playoff. I just can't. I'm never going to be supportive of that. If you lose 1/3 of your games, I cannot be in favor of you making the playoff. Your win-loss percentage is 67%. That's not good enough to have a chance to play in the postseason. It's not. Now you don't get mad at your coach until you lose the 4th game of the year. What are we doing? I can't get on board with that. And I understand that when we move into 9-game conference schedules in the SEC, y'all, this year is going to be an absolute grind. an absolute grind. There's one bye week, there's 9 conference games with a lot of the teams playing high-level non-conference opponents as well. It's going to be a beast. And it's going to be a survival of the fittest. But at the same time, it's probably going to lead to a lot more losses. So maybe that's what the Big Ten's banking on. The SEC is going to beat themselves up this year, so they'll be more willing to come to the table with a compromise that would lead to expansion beyond 16. We'll see. This is going to be a fascinating season in college sports, college football in particular. All right, when we come back, put a bow on the show, tell you what's coming up tomorrow on Mac and Q. All right, welcome back. It's McElroy and Cubelic in the morning on Jock Sunny 405, 955. We're going to pass it over to three-man front here in just a minute. Appreciate all of you for being with us today. Appreciate Larry Williams, Anthony Bertram, and Richard Cross, who joined the show throughout. If you missed any of it, you can download the podcast wherever you get your podcast. Just check out Mac and Cube. First hour, second hour, third hour, all cut up into individual podcasts for you. So if you missed any of the show, you can always go back and check it out there. And we appreciate those of you that have listened in Huntsville on the ump. Appreciate those of you in Montgomery and in Mobile as well for keeping it locked in for the last 3 hours. We also look forward to tomorrow's show. Going to continue on talking about the transfer portal. We'll get Cole's take on the new offensive line coach of the Crimson Tide. And we will continue to spin it ahead as college basketball season moves right along. It's three-man front. They're next.